We have to bury her alive. She has stolen all the love and attention from us.
Keep digging, we're almost there. It's getting really deep now. Just a bit more, don't stop.
Let's find a way to lure her to the forest and push her into the grave.
Aria, we have a surprise for you in the forest. Come, you will like it.
Why are you doing this? Wait, where is Aria?
I thought she was with you.
She's not here. Let's check the back.
Aria, where are you?
She's not here.
Aria, where are you?
Please answer. I can't find her anywhere. She is not here. We have looked everywhere. She's not here. Let's check the riverbank. Aria, can you hear us? She's not here.
It is said that when the gods want to whisper into the ears of men, they do not shout, they send a child. And so it began in the beautiful village of Orie. Orie was not just any village. It sat like a calabash of blessing between thick forests and golden farmlands. At dawn, the sun would stretch lazily over the rooftops of mud houses, and at night, the moon would hang low like a watchful eye. The villagers believed in hard work, in the wisdom of elders, and in the unseen spirits that walked quietly among them. In that village lived a hunter named Dinta. Dinta was strong as Iroko wood and sharp as his own arrows. No animal escaped his sight. His traps never returned empty. Yet inside his compound there was a silence heavier than harmattan dust. For many years, Dinta and his wife Amari waited for the cry of a child, but none came. The women in the village would carry their babies in their bags, singing sweet lullabies that floated through the evening air. Even song pierced Amari's heart like a needle. At festivals, when children danced in circles, Dinta would smile outside, but inside his spirit wept like a lonely flute. Years passed, their hearts remained quiet. They tried herbs, they visited elders, they offered kolanals to the ancestors. Nothing changed. Until one evening, when the sky turned the color of burnt orange and the wind carried a strange stillness, Amari spoke. "Let us go to the river," she whispered. "Let us beg Mother Water herself." Now the river in Orie was not an ordinary river. The elders called it Mirinne, the living water. It was believed that the river listened, it watched, and sometimes when moved by true sorrow, it answered. The next morning, before the cock crowed, Dinta and Amari walked to the riverbank. The mist hovered above the water like spirits guiding a treasure. They knelt on the cool sand. Amari's tears fell first. "Mother of waters," she cried softly. "You who fill empty pores and quench burning throats, fill my empty womb." Dinta bowed his head low, something he had never done before any living man. "If we had offended, forgive us." He said, "If we must give, we will give, but let our home know the laughter of a child." The river was silent. For a long time nothing happened. Then the water began to ripple, not with wind, not with fish, but with something deeper. The mist thickened, the air grew colder. From the shelter of the river rose a soft glow, like moonlight trapped inside the water. A voice, gentle but powerful, echoed across the surface. "Your tears have reached me." The couple trembled. "You shall have a child," the voice continued. "But remember, every gift carries a shadow. Raise the child with wisdom. Protect the child from pride. For what is given by water can also be reclaimed by water." Before they could speak again, the glow disappeared. The river returned to its normal calm, as if nothing had happened. Dinta and Amari looked at each other, unsure if it had all been a dream, but it was not. One evening, as she sat outside grinding melon seeds, a strange dizziness washed over her. She held her stomach and smiled softly. Life had returned to her womb. When Dinta heard the news, he fell to his knees in gratitude. The villagers rejoiced. The river has truly remembered this household, they said. But as the months passed by, unusual signs began to show. The birds no longer sang loudly near their huts. Instead, they perched quietly on the rooftop, watching. At night, a soft glow sometimes escaped from the cracks of their mud walls, and on the very day Amari went into labor, the sky changed. It began with a whisper of wind. When the whisper grew into a howl, a strange wind swept through Orie. Fierce but not destructive, it spun dust into cycles and made palm trees bend. As though greeting a queen, ghosts bleated nervously. The elders rushed out of their huts, clutching their staffs. This is no ordinary bird, the oldest among them muttered. Inside the hut, Amari cried out in pain, as though the wind cycled the compound like an invisible guardian. Dinta stood helpless, his heart pounding like a talking drum. Then, just as suddenly as it began, silence. The wind stopped, and the cry pierced the air. The midwife smiled. In her arms lay a baby girl whose face shone with a soft light, as though morning had chosen to rest upon her skin. Her tiny hairs were pure white, white like fresh cotton, white like harmattan mist under the moon. The midwife trembled. Ah, this child. Dinta stepped closer. The baby opened her eyes. They glowed faintly, not frighteningly, but powerful, like a lantern in the dark. Amaria exhausted but smiling. She whispered, "Her name shall be called Aria." News spread around Orie faster than wildfire in dry grass. The villagers gathered outside the compound, murmuring in disbelief. A child with hair like snow? A face that shines? Is she spirit or human? Some were afraid, some were curious, some bowed their head in respect, but as days passed by, fear turned into wonder. On the very morning after Aria's birth, rain fell gently, even though it was not the rainy season. The dry farms drank deeply. Seeds that had refused to sprout suddenly pushed through the soil. Within weeks, barren trees began to bear fruit. A sick child in the next compound recovered after Aria's laughter filled the air. Goats gave birth to twins. Yams grew as large as newborn calves. It was as if blessing followed her tiny footsteps. The village began to say, "She carries light inside her." Dinta's household, once quiet and childless, now became the heartbeat of Orie. And as if heaven itself had opened a gate, Amari found herself pregnant again. The news no longer shocked the villagers, but it filled them with expectations. This time, the pregnancy was smooth, like flowing oil. No strange winds, no glowing walls, just quiet strength. When the time came, Amari delivered safely. Not one, not two, but three baby girls, three daughters, born under the same moon, their cries rising together like a choir. Though not shone like Aria, each carried an unusual beauty, eyes bright with intelligence, skin smooth as river stones, and voices sweet like flutes. The hunter's compound overflowed with children, 4 daughters in all. The once silent hall now rang with laughter, footsteps, songs, and the clatter of little calabashes. The villagers shook their heads in amazement. From emptiness to abundance, they said. The river does not give in small measures, but among the elders, there were whispered carried only in low tones. When blessings come like a flood, one must watch the banks carefully. And far away, deep beneath the water's bank, something stirred. As Aria grew, her light did not dim, it deepened. She moved through Orie like morning sunlight, slipping gently through palm leaves. Wherever her small feet touched, hope followed. If she visited a sick elder, fever would break like a cracked pot. If she stepped into a struggling farm, the crops will stand tall within days, their leaves greener than envy itself. The villagers began to wait for her the way dry land waits for rain. Women would call from their compounds, Aria, my daughter, pass here first. Old men stretched their wrinkled hands to bless her. Children ran behind her, laughing like a flock of excited birds. Soon gifts began to pour into Dinta's compound. Yams stacked high like pillars, palm oil shining red at sunset, gold tied to the wooden fence, baskets of fish fresh from the river. Accept this, the villagers would say. Your daughter has brought peace to my home. Nita and Amari were overwhelmed. Their once humble household now bustled like a chief's palace. Smoke from their kitchen never ceased rising. There was always something cooking. Visitors are always arriving. And when Aria walked past the market square, the market would pause. Traders stopped mid-bargain. Posters froze in mid-air. Even the stubborn goats seemed to lower their heads. Her white hair shimmered under the sun like traces of silver. Her face glowed softly, not blinding, but impossible to ignore. She did not walk with pride. She walked with gentleness, greeting everyone with smiles that melted anger like butter in hot soup. The women began to sing whenever she appeared. Aria, light of Orie, child whose footsteps carry blessings, daughter of favor, morning star of our village. Their voices would rise together, filling the market with rhythm and joy. Some clapped, some danced. Children echoed her name as if it were festival chant. Aria would blush and lower her head shyly. But not everyone's heart was light. Inside the hunter's compound, behind the laughter and songs, shadows were seen. Shadows were forming. Her three younger sisters watched everything. They watched the gifts pile up. They watched the villagers bow silently when Aria passed. They watched their parents' face glow with pride each time her name was mentioned. At first, they tried to ignore it. She is older, one would say. She was born special, another would whisper. But jealousy is like a tiny ant. It may be small, but it can crawl into the ear and disturb the mind. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with tired colors, the three sisters gathered behind the hut, near the stack of firewood. Their voices were low, sharp like hidden thorns. Have you noticed? The second sister said, folding her arm tightly. Nobody sings our names in the market. Mother smiles differently when she looks at her, the third muttered. And the gifts? The first added bitterly. All because of her. It is as if we do not exist. Silence fell between them. The air grew heavy. They could hear faintly from the front of the compound, villagers laughing with Aria. The sound burned their ears. It is always Aria this, Aria that, one hissed. Are we not also daughters of the house? Their faces hardened like clay left too long in the sun. In that quiet corner of the compound, something dangerous began to grow. Not light, not blessing, but envy. And envy once watered does not stay small for long. Jealousy, when felt daily, grows teeth. The three daughters carried it in their hearts like hidden fire. They smiled in the daytime, but in night their whispers were sharp as broken calabash. Then one morning, the royal gong sounded across Orie. The deep echo rolled through the village like thunder announcing rain. The king is summoning everyone to the square, people shouted. Now the ruler of Orie was King Ezema, a man whose word carried the weight of iron. He was respected from the smallest hut to the thickest forest. Beside him stood his only son, Prince Obiora, young, strong, and ready to take a wife. The entire village gathered at the square. Traders abandoned their stores. Farmers' wives fell from their hands. Even children stood unusually still. King Ezema raised his staff. My people, he began, his voice steady as a drum beat. The gods have spoken. A murmur swept through the crowd. They have directed that a wife should be chosen for my son, not by beauty alone, not by wealth, but by divine instruction. The crowd held its breath. The gods have revealed. The king continued, that the chosen wife comes from the household of the Dinta, grabs aroused like popcorn in a hot oil. All eyes turned towards Dinta's family. The three sisters had leapt into their throats. This is it, they thought. Each one quickly adjusted her wrapper. One strengthened her beads, another lifted her chin higher. The third forced a graceful smile, her eyes shining with desperate hope. Aria stood calmly beside her mother. She did not adjust her hair. She did not force a smile. She looked neither excited nor afraid, only peaceful, as though she had already heard what heaven intended. The king lifted his staff again. The gods have spoken clearly, he declared. The chosen bride for Prince Obiora is Aria. Silence. Then despair exploded. Some screamed in joy, others clapped wildly. Drums began beating. Women shouted, their voices rising like birds into the sky. Aria, of course, it was Aria. The three sisters felt the words strike them. Like stones. Aria. Again? Before they could gather their thoughts, royal servants stepped forward. They laid down rich fabrics, woven with gold thread, coral beads, brass pots filled with cowries, goats, yams, jars of honey, wealth poured out like a broken treasure. These were gifts to honor the hunter's family. The royal messenger announced, prepare your daughter. In 7 days, she shall come to live in the palace. 7 days. Dinta and Amaria were overwhelmed, tears shining in their eyes. From barrenness to royalty, who could have written such a story? The villagers danced until dusk. But inside the hearts of the three sisters, something dark finally snapped. That night, while celebration songs still floated faintly from distant compounds, the sisters gathered again behind the hut. Their faces were no longer just bitter, they were furious. It is too much, one spat. She has taken everything. First the praises, then the gift, now the palace, another growled. Are we to remain shadows forever? The third whispered, her voice trembling with anger. The moon watched silently as they spoke words which could never be taken back. If Aria is no longer here, one said slowly, the king will have no choice but to choose again. Silence. The idea hung in the air like a dangerous weapon. They looked at one another. No one said no. Before dawn, even when the roosters were still dreaming, the sisters slipped into the forest with hoes and shovels. Their hands shook, not with fear, but with rage. They dug, they dug. The pit grew deep, deep enough to swallow light. On the sixth evening, they lured Aria into the forest. Come, they said sweetly, let us gather flowers. Soon you will leave us for the palace. Let us spend time together as sisters. Aria smiled gently. She followed. The forest was quiet, too quiet. When they reached the clearing, Aria paused. But before she could speak, hands pushed her from behind. She fell down into darkness. Her white hair flashed once like lightning, then vanished into the pit. The sisters' breathing was heavy as thunder. From below there was no scream, no curse, no cry, only silence. With trembling hands they began to cover the grave. They poured sand into the pit, shovel after shovel. Earth swallowed her glow. They buried her alive. When they finished, the ground looked untouched, smooth, innocent, as if it had never known a secret. The sisters stood there, staring at the soil. The forest wind blew softly, but far away, deep beneath the river's surface, something stirred. The sisters brushed the last grains of sand from their clothes and walked home as though nothing had happened. The forest swallowed their footprints. Back in the compound, evening had settled gently over Orie. Smoke coiled lazily from kitchen fires. Dinta sat outside, sharpening his hunting knife. Amaria was arranging dry fish in a basket. "Where is Aria?" Amaria asked casually, not looking up. The sisters forced confused expressions on their faces. "We have not seen her since morning," one said quickly. "She said she wanted to visit the river," another added. Dinta frowned. "At this hour?" They searched the compound. No Aria. They checked the market square. No Aria. They ran to the river bank.
Aria,
Only
where are
quiet
you?
water.
She's not here.
By
Let's check the
nightfall,
riverbank.
the
Aria,
entire
can you hear
village
us?
knew.
She's not here.
The drums that once beat in celebration now beat in alarm. Men carried torches into the forest. Women called her name until their voices cracked. "Aria!" The wind carried the sound, but no answer returned. For 5 days, Orie searched. They combed the forest. They checked neighboring villages. They offered prayers at the river, but Aria was nowhere to be found. Her mother's tears flowed like a river. She sat on the bare ground, rocking herself like a woman lost in a storm. "My light, my child." The villagers wept openly. The market became dull and silent. Even the farm seemed to drop in sorrow. It was as if the sun itself had dimmed. The three sisters pretended to mourn, but at night, sleep avoided them. They heard things, whispers in the wind, soft scratching beneath the earth, their names called in darkness, in voices that does not belong to humans. On the fifth night, as the moon stood full and watchful, the forest trembled. In the very clearing where they had dug the pit, the ground began to shake, at first gently, then violently. Birds flew out in panic. Trees moved though there was no wind. The soil cracked open with a sound like thunder splitting a mountain. From the broken earth rose a figure, slowly, terribly. It was Aria, but no longer the soft, glowing girl of Orie. Her white hair now flowed long and wide, shining brighter than lightning. Her eyes burned like twin moons in a dark sky. Her skin glowed with a fierce, blinding light. The air around her rippled as though fire and water were dancing together. She did not walk. She floated. The earth that had swallowed her now obeyed her. The next morning, the sisters woke to find their room filled with water up to their ankles. They screamed. When they ran outside, the water vanished. That night, their wrapper caught fire without flame. The next day, their reflections in calabashes shows Aria's glowing face staring back at them. They could not eat. They could not sleep. Everywhere they turned, they saw her. In the market, they heard her voice whisper, "Sisters." In the forest, her shadow moved without body. The villagers began to notice. "Why do you tremble so much?" people asked them. But the torment grew worse. One night, Aria appeared fully before them, not in a dream, not a shadow, but standing at the foot of their mats, glowing like judgment itself. "You buried me," her voice echoed, not loud, but powerful enough to shake their bones. "You covered light with darkness." The sisters fell flat on the ground, shaking. "Forgive us," they cried. But forgiveness does not bloom from fear alone. The next morning, unable to bear the torment any longer, the three sisters ran to the village square. They fell before the elders and confessed everything. The pit, the lies, the jealousy that had eaten them alive. The village gasped in horror, and Maria fainted. Dinta's face hardened like carved stone. The elders rose slowly. Jealousy, the oldest among them said, is a poison that first kills the one who carries it. After long deliberation, judgment was passed. The three sisters were banished from Orie. No drum escorted them, no tear followed them. They walked out of the village carrying nothing but shame. As for Aria, she no longer returned to live among humans. Some say she walked into the river one quiet evening and dissolved into the light. Others say she still appears in the forest. Until today in Orie, when mothers see their children quarreled in envy, they tell them the story of Aria, the girl who brought blessings like rain, and whose light could not be buried. And the elders always end with this: jealousy and envy are not small fires, they are disasters that burn entire destinies.